On the morning of March 16, 1968, American soldiers entered a Vietnamese village called My Lai. There were no enemy fighters there. No weapons. No combatants. No resistance. Just farmers. Women preparing breakfast. Children playing. Elderly men and women starting their morning. Within 4 hours, 504 of them were dead. And the United States Army covered it up for over a year. Called it a military success. Gave the soldiers medals. And the only man ever convicted served 3.5 years under house arrest. In a comfortable apartment. With a television. To understand what happened at My Lai, you have to understand what American soldiers had been told about the Vietnamese people before they arrived. By 1968, the Vietnam War had been grinding for years with no clear victory in sight. American soldiers were dying in a jungle they did not understand, fighting an enemy they could not see. The frustration had built into something dangerous. Military commanders had introduced the body count system, measuring battlefield success by the number of Vietnamese killed rather than territory gained. More bodies meant a successful operation. And when you measure success by bodies, the definition of who qualifies as the enemy becomes dangerously flexible. Charlie Company, the unit sent to My Lai, had been losing men to mines and booby traps for weeks. They had never seen the enemy. They had only seen their friends die. By the time they were briefed for the My Lai operation on the night of March 15, 1968, they had been told the village was a Viet Cong stronghold. They had been told to expect resistance. They had been told to destroy the village and kill the enemy. What they found when they arrived was breakfast being cooked on morning fires. Captain Ernest Medina commanded Charlie Company. Lieutenant William Calley commanded the 1st Platoon. At approximately 7:30 in the morning, American helicopters landed at the edge of My Lai. The soldiers moved in expecting a firefight. There was no firefight. There was no resistance. There was nothing. Only unarmed Vietnamese civilians going about the first hours of an ordinary morning. What happened next has been documented in testimony from soldiers who were there, soldiers who participated, soldiers who refused, and soldiers who spent the rest of their lives trying to forget. Villagers were pulled from their homes. Groups were herded together. And then Calley gave orders that no military code in any army in the world authorizes. He ordered his men to kill the civilians. Some soldiers refused. Some broke down. Some obeyed. By noon, My Lai no longer existed as a living village. 504 people, men, women, children, infants, killed in 4 hours by American soldiers on a search and destroy mission that found nothing to destroy except the people who lived there. One man tried to stop it. Warrant Officer Hugh Thompson Jr. was flying an observation helicopter above My Lai when he realized what was happening below. He landed his helicopter between a group of American soldiers and Vietnamese civilians who were about to be killed. He pointed his own weapons at the American soldiers. He told his crew that if the soldiers moved toward the civilians, they were to open fire on them. He evacuated the Vietnamese civilians in his helicopter. He reported what he had witnessed immediately. His report was ignored. The military chain of command above him had already decided what My Lai was going to be. A success. The official military report described the operation as a significant engagement with the enemy. 128 enemy combatants killed. That was the number released to the press. 128 enemy combatants. Every single one of them was an unarmed civilian. The soldiers of Charlie Company received commendations. The military commanders who oversaw the operation received no scrutiny. And My Lai was buried in the files of the United States Army, classified, suppressed, and forgotten. For over a year. Then a letter arrived. Ronald Ridenauer was a Vietnam veteran who had heard what happened at My Lai from soldiers who had been there. He spent months confirming the details. Then he wrote letters. 30 letters. To the President. To the Pentagon. To members of Congress. He said simply, something terrible happened at My Lai, and the American people deserve to know what it was. For months, nothing happened. Then investigative journalist Seymour Hersh picked up the story. On November 12, 1969, over 18 months after the massacre, the story broke publicly. The photographs taken by military photographer Ron Heberl showed what the official reports had hidden. The bodies on the paths between the rice paddies. The families who had been eating breakfast. America saw what had been done in its name. And the country fractured. The military was forced to act. 26 soldiers were charged with crimes related to My Lai. 25 had their charges dropped before trial. Only one man stood trial. Lieutenant William Calley. The court-martial lasted 4 months. On March 29, 1971, Cali was found guilty of murdering 22 Vietnamese civilians. He was sentenced to life imprisonment with hard labor. 3 days later, President Richard Nixon personally ordered Cali released from the military stockade and placed under house arrest while his case was appealed. House arrest. In a comfortable apartment at Fort Benning. Nixon received over 300,000 letters and telegrams supporting his decision to protect Cali. 300,000 Americans wrote to their president to say the man convicted of ordering the murder of 22 civilians deserved to be protected. Cali served 3.5 years. He was released in 1974 on a federal court order. He returned to civilian life, opened a jewelry store in Columbus, Georgia, and said nothing publicly about My Lai for 35 years. In 2009, he gave his first public apology, not to the Vietnamese government, not to the families of the 504 dead, to the Kiwanis Club of Greater Columbus, Georgia, a local civic group. That was the apology 504 people received. 41 years after they were killed, a speech at a Kiwanis Club. Hugh Thompson, the pilot who tried to stop it, spent years being threatened and harassed by people who considered him a traitor for reporting what he had witnessed. His car windows were broken. Dead animals were left on his doorstep. Vietnam veterans called him a coward for turning his weapons on fellow American soldiers. He was not given the Soldier's Medal for his actions at My Lai until 1998. 30 years later, 3 years before he died, he said when they finally gave him the medal, some of the veterans in the audience turned their backs on him. 30 years later, they still turned their backs. My Lai was not an accident. It was the logical end of a military system that measured success by body count, dehumanized an entire civilian population, and then protected itself from accountability when the cost of that system became impossible to deny. The commanders who created that system were never charged. The generals who covered it up were never prosecuted. The policies that made My Lai possible were modified, not ended. And the questions My Lai raises about what happens when military power operates without accountability are not historical questions. They are questions about right now. About every conflict where civilian casualties are reported and then reclassified. About every investigation that stalls. About every soldier who follows an illegal order and every system that protects the people who gave it. The people of My Lai were farmers. They were preparing breakfast when the helicopters landed. 504 of them. Share this video because 504 people deserve more than a Kiwanis Club apology and a jewelry store in Georgia. Find us on YouTube, search Official The Odd Archive, and turn on notifications because the next story we are covering makes My Lai look like something they were actually trying to hide. What we found was hidden in plain sight, and nobody has put it together the way we are about to.